Matt, Antoni, welcome. How are you guys doing?
Great. Thanks for having us, Carlos.
Hi, it's great being here. Thanks for having us.
I have to say congratulations. Now that we're doing like the official start of the podcast, I want to say congratulations because you guys have such a great community, man. There's a lot of trust and people that are really excited about your project at a very early stage. I mean, like you guys aren't even trading anywhere yet, so it's just amazing. Also, the Telegram bot you use is amazing.
The Telegram bot use?
Yeah. The Telegram bot
Rose.
you use, Rose. Yeah.
Rose is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think we were just very, it's somewhat a mix of a luck and maybe being somewhat prepared. But we've always thought of the community as equal partners when it comes to building the project, and having like actual relationships with people that we didn't know prior to starting this is really cool because they bring a ton of value, and these are just people that popped up on Telegram one day, and yeah, so it sort of happened, I would say.
Would you like to just quickly, for the people that are viewing this that are not members of the community, give us a quick recap of what is, well, as quick as you may want to do it. You have an hour to do your recap if you want, of what Aleph Zero is and what your roles are in there.
Mhm. Matt, do you want to
Whoever
start?
wants to start.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I was could I'll go ahead and start there, but yeah. So what we've been doing with Aleph Zero is essentially build out a new layer one, but how this is being done is really by going ahead and looking at everything from first principles. So the actual fundamentals whenever it comes to understanding distributed systems, how to build out these types of new technology stacks, and all of this really comes down to having an understanding of how distributed systems and the research that's been going on in that space, at least in the academia, for the last 4 decades. And once you have that solid understanding, then you have to start to figure out, okay, well, how do we translate that into these public and permissionless settings? And from there, being able to slightly update our understanding of this previous paradigm. So everything from before with distributed systems was all permission based, was all a single entity was in control of, say, a distributed database. And now we're sitting in this sort of setting where now it's no longer a single party that's in control. You have multiple parties. And not just as it just multiple parties, you have parties that can enter the network and leave the network whenever they want, right? And so in the previous paradigm and all of the past literature was all about how do you have a permission network. It's static. You don't have this dynamicism. You don't have essentially voluntary choices made by network participants to either choose to continue to support networks or to leave them whenever they want. And so then the idea here is how can we go ahead and have a better understanding of this new security, this model and the underlying security that goes with it. And then also how can we, basically continue to build on top of this, right? And that's what we've been really focusing on is how can we go ahead and do all of this, but not really try to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. We want to actually use all of this information that we have. There's a fundamental and sort of very volumetric, but work body of work that's already been done. How can we still make use of this and then go ahead and sort of push forward in this new setting?
Anything you'd like to add to that, Anthony?
I think what we've always set out to do, and also thanks to the core team that we've introduced, is to combine the elements that have been developed in the past, which Matt touched upon, and really like the major innovation we've introduced so far is just a consensus. Next step is privacy, but for the time being, it's strictly a consensus part, and all the rest is inherited, really.
I think, I mean, and yeah, just to finish off this little bit, your roles in Aleph Zero are, Matt?
So I am the president of the foundation. Although we really try not to put so much emphasis on roles. We're
Right.
co-founders, primarily, and then the idea is to sort of work together on a lot of aspects.
Okay, I like that. Let's leave that as co-founders. If you feel like your organization is more horizontal, you should be proud of that and saying that as often as possible. Um, I Go ahead, please.
Uh, so we're definitely prioritizing the horizontal structure, meaning that you have your key decision makers in respective departments or areas of expertise, but uh, we definitely don't want to build like a founder centric culture, uh, both internally and externally. Um, and as much as possible, flatten this out while still um, uh, retaining agility and really team wide decision making processes.
I think, yeah, that's a very common theme in crypto, right? How do we avoid having structures? And it's pretty rare when you go outside the world of crypto and you see that most of the world is not like that. But it is pretty cool that we are often trying to emphasize this. Now, the execution is a bit of a problem, isn't it? But in spirit, it's pretty good. For some context, for the guys that do not know Decor, the research firm that we're doing this podcast for, we met you guys through a report that we did on you. We do reports on early stage projects, and yours popped in a radar. And it actually, people often get mad on us on Reddit because they feel like the ratings are very low, but no project ever scores over like a 63, and you guys scored a 57. I personally feel like that's a very good rating because we're gonna do another episode where we go through this report, um, and break it down bit by bit. But yeah, just for context on why we're here, that episode may have actually be already out, or not. You'll see. If you don't see it on the suggestion bar, it's probably not out yet. Anyways, I digress. I really enjoyed the privacy aspects of the project. I really, being myself very much a member of the privacy community and trying to always be up to date with the latest developments in that regard, I think it's pretty interesting that you're building something like this on Substrate. Would you like to speak a bit about why this decision in particular?
So the decision to build on Substrate was a lot of it was economical, and just sort of how can we also provide or not necessarily gain access but integrate with a larger ecosystem. So if you look at the code base for Substrate, consensus by itself is maybe 5% of the actual Substrate technology stack. So us
Mhm.
providing some innovation only on consensus, which is great. We did some phenomenal work on that. It really only touches, barely scratches the surface. So there were definitely certain aspects of the blockchain technology stack that we want to be innovators on, and we want to be able to go ahead and sort of either provide some more, push it forward. And there's other aspects that we really just did not want to sort of touch. And so then the idea is that by choosing Substrate, we could actually focus on the different layers that we're interested in improving, whether or not that's on at a consensus level, whether or not it's at the sort of the privacy framework, or other aspects of all this. Because of the modularity of Substrate, we could really just sort of focus on what it is that we knew we could provide more value to the ecosystem.
And it's funny that I see that you guys are very closely related to Polkadot. I laughed a bit a while ago. I was just revisiting that when I was doing a bit of refreshing my mind for this recording. That at some point you guys were even called a DAP on Polkadot. So would you mind just clarifying your relationship to Polkadot?
Right. So technically, Polkadot is it's its own layer one, or they call it layer
Of
zero,
course.
but it's essentially a layer one is going to be some other sovereign chain that has its own independent consensus layer. And by definition, if you're going to be a part of the Polkadot ecosystem directly as a parachain, you have to be running the grandpa for the consensus layer. And because we're running Aleph BFT for our consensus layer, we can't directly be a parachain, at least under the current, sort of the current requirements and technical specifications for parachains. That doesn't mean that you can't go ahead and do some type of parachain bridge where you have a sovereign independent chain and have some type of identity bridge to the relay chain, to the Polkadot relay chain. But that's the sort of the fundamental difference, is that it is really the choice of the consensus layer. And then also, if you want to say that Polkadot itself does not support the smart contract palettes directly. They offload all of that to all of that choice to the parachains. Whereas in our case with Aleph, we're actually going to go ahead and support natively on the sovereign chain itself, the smart contract layer.
All
And
right.
so
But
then the difference
it
would
also,
be the fact that they use, Polkadot uses Grandpa, we use Aleph BFT, but they both use Substrate for the framework for the blockchain technology stack.
yeah. But I guess, network wise, there's really no similarities. I mean, we're not technically in the Polkadot ecosystem. We simply rely on the same tech stack. Uh, yeah.
So it'd be like saying Bitcoin and Litecoin both use Bitcoin Core, right, for the C++ libraries, and but they're fundamentally different layer ones. They have their own chain and everything, but they rely on some common library. And in our case, where the common library is this. Well, it's not a library, whatever you call it, whenever you use Rust, but it's the Substrate framework.
I feel like it is brave in this day and age to be building a layer one, because you sort of have a bunch of people that are somewhat religiously married to their favorite chains. What do you see like the main value propositions that Aleph Zero needs to put across in order to establish itself as a layer one in this panorama that's so competitive?
Mm. I think that time to finality is a good starting point, or low latency, however you want to phrase it. Native privacy with ZKP and SMPC, but then also, being aware that we do live in a multi-chain world and we want to provide people with choice. We don't want to ostracize developers that wouldn't choose Aleph Zero as their layer one, and that's why liminal is sort of being brought to the table, which will allow also builders on other chains to bridge to Aleph to keep the private state of their smart contracts on our network while still building on their preferred one.
All right, Matt, would you like to add to that?
I really don't have anything else to add to that. That was great. No, but I think that you're right in saying that broadly speaking, the layer one space is very competitive, but that doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement, right? So if we just compare to web browsers or even internet search engines back in the day. I mean, it really took a long time before Google became the default. Or if you're a privacy advocate, like yourself, Carlos, I'm sure you know DuckDuckGo. So the idea here is more about how can we provide a better service for what's already existing and do so in a way that's a little bit more friendly. So user experience is going to be a big deal. How can we make a wallet that is more friendly? How can we provide some additional educational tools to teach people how to think about holding their digital assets, whether or not they're in a hardware wallet or they're connected to some software wallet, or if they're storing the private keys sort of locally. In a lot of sense, the entire crypto space or the digital ledger space really puts the burden back onto the individual, which can both be a good thing from a sort of a philosophical perspective, but at the end of the day, whenever it comes to adoption, the vast majority of people don't necessarily want to think about storing their funds, in a hardware wallet and the security aspects that go with all this. So, how can some of these properties be offloaded and potentially be made more friendly?
I think the Aleph Zero wallet in that regard does a good job, because like the process of getting started with it is somewhat easy, but you have all the options to, yeah, to take all the power of your own keys that you need. I really thought that app was really friendly, although I guess like
From that
it's a V1 with a
perspective,
lot.
yeah.
Sorry.
And yeah, I'm sorry to be barging in, but I think you're just really nice.
Thank you.
Because
So
like
so the yeah
the app
the current
from
app is, oh, like, sorry, Anthony, you go.
no worries, no worries. I just want to say that like the the current app is inherited from Polkadot.js org, and it's effectively, it's not a secret that this is not the best UX. So what we want to do, just to start kick things off, is to decouple the backend from the front end and essentially introduce a very simple, visually or aesthetically pleasing and very UX friendly front end, while because touching the entire backend of Polkadot.js is it would be a massive task for now. So we just want to simplify it as much as we can and sort of introduce this design standard that we want to work with, but from the perspective of like user security and being able to download JSONs and having this option of both backup files and seed, that's great. But still, this has to also look and work the part.
Mhm. I agree, and I wanted to also ask you guys. I'm looking at your site right now to not miss anything on this list, because I found very interesting that you put down some use cases of, well, potential use cases for the chain on your own website, under the title "What will you revolutionize?" Um, some are what I would think it's the most obvious applications of blockchains, but others, I would be curious to see what you think Aleph Zero can bring to this game. In particular, I'm just picking one almost out of random here. Internet of Things. How do you see Aleph Zero being a game changer in when it reaches its final form, for the Internet of Things and all these devices?
Yeah, so the Internet of Things is a difficult topic, right, to discuss, because what you're trying to do is you have all these different devices, sensors, they're collecting data, and now the question becomes: are you inputting that data directly onto the blockchain, right? Or are you storing that in a, maybe a private file server, and then maybe from there storing a hash of that file onto the blockchain, right? So there's a couple of
Right,
nuanced
because
questions
just to
on that.
interject there, just interject there, the Internet of Things is pretty much thought out to be like a Web 2.0 thing, right? Like it, like you said, the Web 3.0 introduces a lot of issues with the way all these things are conceptualized.
Right. Yeah. So you have that. So you have this, like you say, this older design from Web 2.0. But I don't think that that's necessarily problematic. The bigger issue becomes: how do we? I mean, in a lot of sense, the IoT requires the Oracle problem, right, to be solved. So now you have this, all these sensors, all this data, and you need to go ahead and embed it in some way, whether or not it's in a private server or it's in a, on directly onto the blockchain. The issue still remains: how do you trust and verify that the data that's being reported by the sensor is still valid? So you could have hardware that is failing, so right, so if you have like a, temperature gauges, and or humidity or whatever it happens to be, you still have some type of hardware malfunction that could occur. And now you need to be able to still design things in a way where you need to have redundancy in the number of sensors that's reporting the various data. So there's some problems just on the whole garbage in, garbage out sort of notion, where if you have data that's coming in and it's just, invalid, then you just have a lot of problems right there. So now you still need to, have an understanding of: is this data that you're receiving, good, right? So you need to be able to sort of do some type of vetting. You need to do some type of cleaning out all the noise and any potential errors. And this is, just sort of a pre-stage before you even would embed it onto the blockchain. And then the other aspects would come in from things like, if you think of each IoT device itself as either as a separate account or a separate identity, now you can go ahead and embed sort of your decentralized identity, sort of sort of structure with each device itself. And you need to be able to have the different standards for communicating between the different devices. Are they communicating at a directly peer to peer? Are they communicating in some way where you have an intermediary, where the blockchain is the intermediary? Are you are you using, what's your communication protocol just for the the data transfers? All of this is still like, unclear how we're supposed to be going about it. And that's not even, touching whether or not you have a separate IoT sort of network and sort of a sensor data that is, potentially running its own consensus protocol. And in which case, if it's doing something like that, then you have to have full re-implementations onto the ARM architecture, right? Because most of these IoT devices aren't going to be running on some type of x86-64. You're going to be on some, probably on ARM. And now you have to be, doing all your, redevelopment of the protocol, at that layer, just so that you can run it on that hardware.
I think it's really fascinating as well to think of where does the blockchain come in all of this, because like you said, you probably do not need it for every single process of every single device. So you have to make design choices and trade-offs, right? And if you have a high speed blockchain like Aleph Zero, that does help. So do you think that's like that, as well as privacy, is the main thing that Aleph Zero can bring to this game?
Yeah, I think that the time to finality is definitely important. Being able to reach agreement on what is the data that's being, that is valid in some distributed system is really paramount for, essentially any type of system, in the, moving forward. So and then also the privacy, definitely the privacy has to be addressed, because whenever you look at what corporates are really interested in, they don't want to necessarily reveal, transaction information, data that could be proprietary to their companies. None of this should be revealed on a public platform. So you need to be able to address these concerns accordingly. And either with how we're looking at doing this with Liminal is primarily through the secure multi-party computation sort of aspect.
But there's also
And
like it's a tricky question, because like the kind of privacy that we want to do somewhat cannibalizes the performance part, because we want to do it in a purely software based way as well. So that's going to be definitely slower. MPCs are significantly slower than ZKPs. um, and then when we're talking enterprise adoption on the privacy part, then we still need to have a data controller. So any like GDPR and HIPAA and all those rules still have to be adhered to. So it's a very challenging road, I would say, ahead.
I would want you to expand a little bit on this, because Aleph Zero does use the word a lot, enterprise. So I think that's a word, and I don't want to put a burden on you guys because this is not your fault, but I think that's a word that gets a bad rep because of Bitcoin Satoshi's vision and because of Craig Wright and all this. But you use it a lot, and I know that you don't use it in a centralized and in a let's use blockchains for a centralization manner. So would you mind on laying down your definition of what you mean by enterprise in in the context of Aleph Zero?
Mm. I'm just gonna quickly say that to the way we see it, or the way I see it, is business and institutional adoption of a public network.
Yeah, so it's more about how can an enterprise go ahead and deploy a decentralized application on a public network, but then still maintain the necessary privacy layer that they're required to, or that their that their desire is for as a company, right? So they're private institutions, they're private companies, and they don't want to necessarily disclose everything on a public ledger. And so now the question is, how can they leverage their whatever application that they're trying to build by utilizing a smart contract framework, a public ecosystem, get exposure and access to this entire ecosystem as opposed to being blocked off and sort of siloed in their own consortium chain. And then from there, still maintain all of the requirements that they're looking for, either on the security side or on the privacy side.
Yeah. And also one more thing to add is that this idea came to us very much at the beginning, and also that's one of the reasons we went through the peer review process in 2019 at the and publishing at the ACM conference. um, that's why we also wanted Trail of Bits to do the audit, the security audit, because that hopefully shows some level of maturity of the heart of the network, the consensus. So like that's the path we want to. Okay, end of thought. Sorry,
Hmm.
we ran out of
It
language.
uh, no worries. Would you like to rephrase that in that sense, or is that
No,
all
it's
right?
fine. I'll plug it in later on.
Okay, perfect. So we have you're very much right that you also need to allow private companies or private institutions to develop on blockchains and to release their own products. And I would even say choose which contracts they would like others to compose upon and which ones they would like to keep for themselves. Uh, then it's up to the general public to decide if they want to use or not their products, right? I would say that a DeFi protocol, for example, that obscures how some of their contracts work, uh, could be a bit problematic, but could also, for some users, I mean, in the sense that you don't know where your coins are going or you don't know what's happening exactly with them. But at the same time, you do gain the advantage that makes them a lot harder to exploit, and that makes them a lot that somewhat is an incentive for innovation, because then you're not going to have what happened to Uniswap, that you roll out your new protocol and that same day someone just forks it off and creates a different version, right? um, what other use cases do you see for these yeah, for these features that allow private companies or privately held institutions to just deploy things on the blockchain?
Well, I guess definitely, outside of the core technology, it's also about providing support and actually providing expertise to businesses looking to deploy on a new chain. So with this, we're sort of working or betting on the adoption of Substrate and the entire Ink smart contract space, as well as Rust as a dominant language in the blockchain space. Well, I generally saying use cases for enterprise use is like saying let's build software for enterprise. So it's an insanely
Uh-huh.
vast term, and we generally want to take it step by step and maybe partner on partner basis. Basically, um, like maybe 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, our assumption was let's build a superior piece of technology and at the same time obviously looking for a perfect application. And it was a time where for instance Phantom rebranded as a blockchain for smart cities, and our major challenge was positioning Aleph Zero either as a chain specialized in one vertical or as a general purpose platform. And to be perfectly frank, we went with the general purpose platform concept because you can apply this kind of technology to like so many different verticals. And in the end it's about who actually chooses you or who you proactively decide to build with. to deploy solutions on top of the network. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think to sort of to add on to that, whenever it comes to enterprise solutions and applications, is really more of a market driven approach. So we don't necessarily know all the fundamental details of an enterprise's sort of internal applications that they're looking at exploring. What we can do is we can provide the support that's necessary to build out their application and identify what are the key components of what is it that you want to have private. What is the sort of is it this data? Is it the transaction? Is it the value transfer? What are the different pieces that we can actually provide that would be private for you? And then from there, it's going to be more bespoke and more custom.
I think also like building a general purpose thing as opposed to something that specializes in one use case, it just gives you like a lot more anti-fragility, right? Like it exposes you to better outcomes that you might have not foreseen. Whether whether if you want to be very centrally planned, very structured, that could play against you, like when some unexpected event comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are also risks. I mean, you can lose focus easily and go into a rabbit hole that you then have to dig yourself out from. But generally speaking, it is a general purpose tech and a general purpose platform. So boxing it in a single vertical wouldn't really make any sense.
Hmm. Okay. Um, guys, also like I would say like I'm trying to think of what to focus on this conversation that we're not covering more in depth in the report review. Uh, but in general, I would say that it's very interesting to me. Like I said, when people are building layer ones, uh, which are like I said, not as common. It's not like a DeFi project that there are dozens and dozens. Like building a layer one is something that you get one shot at. Um, I just wonder how would you would wish for the your ecosystem to to be born, right? Like, what would you like to see sparking up in the Aleph Zero ecosystem to make sure that you're going on the right track?
I'm a sucker for sustainability use cases. Anything that contributes to say improving the situation in the emerging markets, and I mean that like we were working actively with one of our funds, Necker Ventures, to recognize opportunities in Latin America. And just recently, a very interesting individual reached out to us from Nigeria, where they're setting up an incubator for local startups. And we've spent over an hour talking about how potentially, the adoption of a high performance, low cost, and privacy centric network could work in this particular geographical region. Um, Mainly because like the current solution is just way too expensive, and due to some socio-political factors, the privacy aspect is also very much relevant. So this is something that I personally definitely want to focus on, and I think it's shared across the team as well. um, but we also have the DeFi part that we're working on. So maybe Matt, you could.
Yeah. So the other aspect is just really more of a private DeFi solution. So obviously we have a couple of things on our end that we're building out on that, but we're also looking forward to the community just taking the tools that we're building and going at it themselves. I mean, in the end, this is a public and permissionless platform, so we can of course encourage certain applications, but at the same time it's also going to be what other people want to build.
And I think going a bit back to the sustainability use cases, um, I'm very interested in that because right now you see a couple of applications for blockchains. One of them is finance, obviously, and finance. You know that it reaches a point where it just becomes again a game of the financial institutions, right? You can only reinvent things for the average user, uh, up to up to the point where they're willing to be hands on, and then it just becomes a game for the major players. But sustainability is like a use case that goes into every detail of our lives. So would you mind me asking, how would you like to see Aleph Zero used in, yeah, in this regard, or how would you see like the first applications of it,
Yeah.
and
Um,
maybe even
I
like
mean,
the applications way down the road?
yeah. So I think, without like any, I think the major advantage of Aleph Zero when it comes to say green use cases or greener use cases is simply the efficiency of the platform. I mean, we're not gonna be forcing our validators to run their nodes on using 100% renewable energy, although we do want to, if that will be possible in the future, we do want to somehow incentivize that. Um, Maybe it will be possible, maybe not. We'll see. But generally speaking, the pure efficiency makes the network just, cheaper, not only on your own pocket but also on the environment. Uh, to make it perfectly positioned for ESG related use cases. And then we did, or rather do have a partner in London called Region Future Planet, whom we've been exploring building a new type of like carbon credit standard. Unfortunately, COVID, they rebranded.
Oh, I did not know this.
uh,
Sorry, we'll have to cut that.
like okay. We've been working with a partner in London called Region Future Planet on a new type of a carbon credit standard. Unfortunately, COVID put those plans on hold, so we're still very much oriented at working in this section and in this area. Um, Unfortunately, the financial use cases are absolutely fascinating, and they're here, and you can work on them like today. When it comes to non-financial ones, this is a bit tricky. Like one of the verticals we've been looking at has been healthcare, for instance, and one of our investors is in Canada is also on the board of one of our hospitals. We've been talking about actually, maybe in the future building a pilot for three hospitals as an NPC use case. Um, but like if you do ask people who are very much into the topic, I don't think we're gonna see any proper medical use case for the next like 2 3 maybe 5 years. Definitely not on the wider adoption side.
Yeah, and then sort of to touch back on the sustainability use cases, you have obviously provenance. So this is going to be your primary issue, whether or not it's provenance for a carbon credit, say a renewable energy credit, if it's coming from a solar power plant, or if you have solar on your house, maybe you could go ahead and use IoT, right, to connect to the blockchain to prove that you've been producing this type of power, and then from there being able to be issued automatically a corresponding renewable energy credit, and then doing so in a way where it would identify this is solar, this comes from this particular region, it was issued on this particular date, and is associated with this x amount of kilowatt hours. And the biggest issue, or rather what you could do with that, sort of just to kind of go, sort of to even build more on what Anthony was saying with the validators and making sure that they're running on 100% renewable. You could even have it where validators could broadcast that they're going to automatically purchase renewable energy credits and then retire them. And then that would be all fully, transparent and available to see on the blockchain itself. So there's a lot of ways where you could, go ahead and combine these different topics together and provide like a more seamless application for for the general market.
And I think there are use cases that are down the road, maybe not immediately, but that involve both things, right? Such as like energy reselling. You have you have places in the world where you can just generate your own electricity, and if you want you can be able to sell it through the grid to someone, and that's a very good use case for blockchains. I know a couple of projects are already working on that. um, Guys, would you like to touch on the common thing? I know that's an exciting bit.
Yeah, so this is so common is our name that we're using for our decentralized exchange. The
Mm-hmm.
idea here is as a minimal viable product, it's just going to be very similar to a Uniswap, but then we want to be able to go ahead and integrate liminal once we have the privacy framework built out. So the idea here is to go ahead and have a bunch of bridges to different chains, Kusama, Polkadot, Ethereum, Cosmos, the entire Cosmos ecosystem, and so on and so forth. And then from there, allow for people to bridge their assets over, use the common decentralized exchange plus the various privacy features that we would have whenever that becomes available to go ahead and do probably more like a dark pool functionality where you can restrict what kind of information is available on the size of the trade, the parties involved, and the price point that might be associated to it.
Mhm. And from
Right. And
also
a
from
lot
a
of, please go ahead.
oh, there's some slight delay, I think, but also from a business standpoint, we think that common is the easiest way. Well, it's not going to be easy, but it is one of the easiest ways for Aleph Zero to start generating or attracting more and more users. I mean, given that we possibly will be able to to launch like a at least proof of concept or an MVP within the next months. This is most likely the fastest way for the network to start getting adoption, and also for us to showcase its abilities.
Hmm. Um, you're looking to integrate various chains into Commons. So I guess like the main proposition is that you will be able to swap um, assets from many chains, right? Is there any yeah? Is there anything you'd like to describe about the technology that you use to achieve this,
Yeah,
and how
yeah. So
users
you,
can expect
there's
to interact with Common?
Yeah, so sorry, I should have let you finish. But what you have is essentially two different types of bridging technologies that exist, depending on whether or not you're using a system or a chain that has a the longest chain rule, and whether or not it has a smart contract escrow, or some type of smart contract script available. So in the case of Bitcoin, you have longest chain rule, so you don't have instant finality. You also don't have a very powerful smart contract language, at least natively, right? Obviously, you have side chains with rootstock and how they're doing things there, but sort of at a native level, just directly on Bitcoin itself, you don't really have much ability to do lots of smart contract functionality. Yeah, you have the different script opcodes that are available, but these are rather limited. So in this setting, what you do is you can combine. I mean, now with the release of Taproot, there's the ability of having Schnorr signatures, which is essentially some type of threshold signature scheme. So with these threshold signature schemes, you can go ahead, and it doesn't really matter. Threshold signatures you can think of as a black box. We have our own threshold signature scheme, not based off of a Schnorr, but it is a threshold signatures that is a general purpose. And so it works under any type of elliptic curve cryptography, meaning it would also work for Bitcoin as well. It's the same type of technology that say RenVM or Keep Network are looking at are using. But the idea is that now you have a threshold signature. You can go ahead and divide out the private key shares to a bunch of different parties. Those parties put up some type of bond or collateral to be a key shareholder. And then from there, they can go ahead and, a user can deposit into an address that's controlled by some aggregation of all these private keys. Some threshold is needed. And that's one mechanism. The other mechanism is just using your standard trust minimized bridges, meaning that you have some type of smart contract escrow system in place where on either end of the two different chains you have the smart contract is essentially running a light client of the other chain on the other side of the bridge, and this is happening on both ends. And in this situation, things are a little bit, or not a little bit, but are quite a bit simpler, because now you just have funds that are being put into the bridge escrow system, and then just held by that particular smart contract. And then it just is easier to move assets back and forth in this way. And so once you have those two different types of bridging technologies available to you, you essentially get access to the entire distributed ledger space with all types of assets, whether it's things that are Bitcoin Core based, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, and so on, or if it's Ethereum tokens, like BAT, basically anything that would be sitting on directly on Ethereum. And not just Ethereum, but also things on the Cosmos ecosystem, things on the Polkadot ecosystem, and now with all these different bridging technologies, you can go ahead and get these assets on a decentralized exchange and just allow for people to trade accordingly. Now, the biggest problem that we're going to start seeing because of this whole multi-chain world is going to be coming from this notion of maximal extraction value. So this is the idea of minor extraction value, but now applied in the multi-chain setting. So you have different. So maybe if I can touch on what minor extraction value is, and really it's really, I think, more important to talk about it is maximal extraction value. And this problem exists because you have different validators. These validators are in some position of authority. They have some privileged position and privilege information made available to them by being the authorized set of users that can create blocks. So whenever you're a user and you're submitting a transaction to the network, the validator or validators receives those transactions, and they have that ability of ordering the transactions as they see fit, right? So they could, if they want to, go ahead and try to front run your order on a Uniswap, and this is what's called the minor extraction value problem. And this is really only occurring in say on Ethereum in a singular case. But now extend this notion to what's going on whenever you have multiple chains. You have multiple assets moving back and forth. You have different liquidity pools on different layer ones. And so now you have a situation where you might have validators who are running or who are participating in the consensus on multiple chains. They have the ability of reordering the blocks in whatever way that they could possibly want across all these different ecosystems. And now they can go ahead and choose to try to extract as much value from their privileged position as much as possible. So the question is, how can this at least be in some sense mitigated? How can you thwart them from having access to particular information, or from choosing an order on all the transactions that is going to be beneficial to them? So at the end of the day, who are the people who are really more disenfranchised by this? It's primarily the retail users. It's not your power users. It's not your professional, institutional investors who probably have the ability of paying for the development and for teams that can look for these potential arbitrage or sort of scenarios where they could extract additional value and front run orders. Is who's going to be hit? It's retail. It's the common person. And what you want to be able to do is provide a means where they're not going to be hit. They are the ones who are still going to benefit broadly from access to these types of decentralized exchange technologies. And what you want to be able to do is really limit the information that's about limit the information that's embedded in a particular transaction itself. So normally a transaction is going to have who's the account, who is the what is the asset that's being traded, what's the price point, and so on and so forth. But if instead that entire information inside of that transaction becomes encrypted, what does a validator do? A validator at this point can only order transactions, but it has no idea what is the content of the transaction itself. So in this
Hmm.
setting, what you have is the ability of these validators to, well, you've thwarted them entirely. They no longer have access to privileged information. So because they don't have access to this privileged information, you can go ahead and encrypt a transaction and then go ahead and finalize it and commit the transaction and put it into the blockchain. Don't actually execute it. You hold off on the execution portion for a little bit, and then you allow for some type of decryption key to be revealed, which then allows for the execution to occur. So you sort of separate out the actual commitment of the transaction of say I want to swap Ethereum for USDC, and I don't necessarily want to, say this is what I'm doing. I just want to commit a transaction and put it onto the Ethereum blockchain. Then once it's committed, what's going to happen is that I reveal in some way, or some other parties will reveal the private key shares using threshold cryptography. And once this is revealed, the network participants, right, the people who are validating and executing the smart contracts, has this new information to be able to decrypt the transaction that I made. And then now the underlying blockchain can be, the state of the system can be updated. And I haven't been potentially front run on an order. My transaction wasn't necessarily censored. I don't have a situation where it's maybe there was a sandwich attack or back run or anything like this. So at the very least, what you're able to do is restrict the ability of these people in privileged positions, validators, and so on, to reorder the transactions in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. And so this is what we're really, one of the key features that we're doing with Common. And the basis of the technology that it's being done on is using this multi-party computation and threshold signatures. So I know there was a lot that I put in there, but there's quite a bit of applications that you have with the multi-party computation technology, that's available. But also you have to start thinking about how does this work whenever you're dealing with a multi-chain set, sort of this multi-chain world, whenever you're trying to solve this maximal extraction value problem.
Okay. Yeah, that's very good information and quite a lot of it. I was very curious about one point that you mentioned because in my mind, um, the situation with front running and sandwich attacks and all of this was the opposite. In my mind, it would always hurt the power user more, or it would hurt the institution more, just by the sheer number of trades, first of all, and just also to add to that the size of them. Um, that's what I always thought. So, what do you think it hurts the retail user the most?
Well, I mean, if you think of, you're right in the sense of, if the institutions aren't running a validator node, then yes, they are going to be uh, proportionally affected at a higher rate because they're doing larger volume transactions. So that is true, but they have the ability of operating validator nodes much more readily
Mm,
than say your retail users. So if you think of who has the access of running a validator, it's going to be the people with the access to larger amounts of capital and the resources available to running that. Either from having access to capital that allows them to build out a team to maintain their node on the network, or just by having the knowledge of being able to run a node on the network, right? If you're in the case of a power user. So I think that regardless of how you want to classify it, the at the end of the day, the retail users are primarily the ones that are affected the most.
okay, yeah, I get that. I also feel like as we onboard more institutions and more funds and yeah, more power users, like you call them, into DeFi, then it's gonna become a lot more prevalent to actually have someone in your team that can run validators, that can be on top of the more technological front, right? Because right now, oh, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing many traders turned crypto traders, many institutions turned crypto investors, but there is not really like their area of expertise, right? There's a very different skill set that comes from managing money and now needs to turn a lot more hands-on technological. Um, I don't know, Anthony. We haven't really we haven't really given you a chance to speak in a while. So, what are your thoughts on bringing these kind of users to Aleph Zero? What does it look like in your roadmap?
Technical savvy enterprise users or institutional
Uh,
users.
I would say more institutional users because right now everything is all about the TVL, right?
Yeah, so I think it's our job to make it easy for them, basically. We need to make sure that they feel secure enough to onboard themselves on the network or to join the network, and that they know what to do before they actually, hop on board. Um, and one challenge is obviously technological. The second one is documenting that particular action that needs to happen, which we haven't done yet. And the third aspect of it, which I'm sort of concerned the most with, is the organizational one, when it comes to the organizational structure itself, and having really robust processes for onboarding multiple partners at once. Mm, because building a startup is difficult as is, and then when you proceed to like becoming a scale up sort of uh, organization, uh, and working with multiple external partners at the same time, you need to have people responsible for like developer relations, who are going to be also supporting those enterprises across 5 6 maybe more different channels. And so yeah, just to reiterate that I don't think this is just a technological challenge. I think it's a multifaceted, problem that we need to address quite quickly.
Yeah, I really think so. I think like the days where you could like bootstrap a blockchain are basically just over, um, because it would be very hard to just get the momentum going that you need to get on users validating your nodes, miners running your stuff. Nowadays, you do need like uh, an ecosystem where you interact with multiple partners, are able to get capital, are able to manage teams, are able to manage technology. So that is quite challenging, guys. We're nearing the yeah, we're getting near to the hour. So I just wanted to ask you if there's anything that we haven't covered in this conversation that you'd like to touch on, or that you'd like to say to your community listening to this. I'm pointing fingers,
uh,
Anthony.
yeah, I mean, uh, we kind of always say the same thing to the community, but we always really mean it, which is we're
Do
really,
not
really
trust
grateful.
OTC groups. Sorry.
Do not, that's one thing. Yeah, okay, that's a fair point. But also, like, we're really happy that without a like spending gazillions on advertising, we've managed to attract a really cool group of people to support the project, and this is something that is to us at least it's unique.
All
Sorry
right,
about that.
Matt.
That was me on the ping. Um, so,
Yeah. So
but I
anything
mean,
else you'd like to
but
add, Matt, before we close?
yeah, so just generally speaking, we're working hard and always working. So, but the thing is that these these things take time, and we are in it for the long haul. We're not here just to launch a project and then walk away after 2 months or something. So the thing is that we've been building this for about almost 4 years now, so going on three and a half, and we're just getting started. I mean, getting started in the sense of the actual work of getting applications built and deployed on the platform. Working with other teams and other communities, and sort of providing more value, and as far as value that we can. Uh, and just sort of doing what we can to improve the space, provide better education, and yeah, we're happy to be here.
And I think that's a that's a very fair point because the economic incentives are there for a reason, and your project starts showing up on people's radars as their movements regarding to the economic part. But like you said, you guys spent a lot of time building the starting line for this project, and now you're pretty much at it. And I understand that it may feel like, okay, now we spent all this time building, and now it feels like we're just getting started. But this is, like, I would say, the beginning of the most exciting times for Aleph Zero. If your community is in it for the long haul, there, this is where the fun will start. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing the other recording with you guys. Really looking forward to checking the report that Discord produced on you, um, and having a public comment sort of on that. I really enjoy that kind of like openness that is rare to see from crypto projects. Most of them just decline to comment on the report. So I'd like to also thank you for that. And well, it's been a lot of fun. I think we'll be speaking very soon. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that does it. Thanks again for having us. It was great to be here.
Yeah, it was fun, and we're looking forward to talking with you soon.
All right, cool. I'll see you guys for the asset report review, and thanks everyone for watching. Bye bye.